My name is Larisa Whitmore, and I thought the worst part was already over. The funeral was done. The casseroles were stacked in my fridge. The last of the distant relatives had hugged me a little too hard and said the same line, "He's in a better place," like they were reading from a script. I drove to my father's apartment the next morning because grief makes you practical. Someone had to collect his things. Someone had to lock the door for the last time. The place still smelled like him aftershave, coffee, that faint antiseptic scent from the hospital that never fully left his clothes. My hands shook as I opened the closet. I told myself I was just looking for important papers, but my eyes went straight to his favorite jacket. It was hanging exactly where he always kept it, like he might come back for it after work. I slid my arms into it without thinking. The fabric was warm from the sun coming through the window, and for half a second it felt like being held. Then my fingers brushed something stiff in the inside pocket. A folded piece of paper. My heart stuttered. I didn't even want to unfold it because part of me knew that whatever was inside would change the shape of my grief forever. But I did. It was my father's handwriting. I knew it the way you know the sound of someone's voice in the dark. 3 lines. No goodbye. No love you. Just this. Daughter, come to my grave tomorrow at 4 p.m. Come alone. I read it twice, then a third time. Slower, like the words might rearrange themselves into something normal. Come alone. I checked the date in the corner. It was written the day before he died. I sat down hard on the edge of his bed, the paper burning in my palm. My father had been weak, medicated, drifting in and out. At least that's what my stepmother, Marilyn, kept telling me. So how did he write this? And why did he hide it in his jacket like it was contraband? My phone buzzed. A text from Marilyn. Are you at the apartment? Don't take anything yet. We'll go through it together. My stomach turned cold. Together meant her deciding what counted as important and what mysteriously disappeared. I stared at my father's note again. Tomorrow, 4 p.m. not 4:01. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I knew one thing with bone-deep certainty. If Marilyn found out about this note, she'd make sure I never made it to that grave. And that's when I realized this was never just about mourning my father. This was a test, and someone in my family was terrified I'd pass. I didn't answer Marilyn's text. Instead, I folded the note back along its original crease and slid it into my purse like it was evidence in a crime, because that's what it felt like. You have to understand something about my stepmother. Marilyn doesn't yell. She doesn't slam doors. She rearranges reality until you start questioning your own memory. By the time she married my father, I was already in my 30s, old enough to see the shift. Old enough to notice how quickly paperwork began disappearing into her filing system, how my father stopped talking finances with me, how decisions suddenly required her approval after he got sick. She controlled everything. Medication schedules, doctor visits, who was allowed in the room, including me. He needs rest. Larisa, she would say softly, positioning herself between us like a gatekeeper. You don't want to upset him. As if I was the danger. The day before he died, she told me he'd been sedated most of the afternoon. He wasn't lucid, she said. He didn't even recognize me at one point. But this note was written that same day, and there was nothing confused about it. I drove home with the paper feeling heavier by the mile. I didn't tell my husband. I didn't tell my friends. The instruction was clear. Come alone. The next morning felt like waiting for a verdict. I kept replaying the funeral in my mind, searching for something I'd missed. There was a moment, right before they closed the casket, Marilyn leaned down and whispered something into my father's ear. I'd assumed it was goodbye. Now I wasn't so sure. At 3:15 p.m. the following day, I was sitting in my car outside the cemetery gates. My hands were so tied around the steering wheel my knuckles were white. I checked the time again. 3:47. I almost didn't go in. Because what was I expecting? A ghost? A confession rising out of fresh dirt? But then another thought hit me. What if someone else was expecting me? What if 4 p.m. wasn't symbolic? What if it was an appointment? I stepped out of the car. The air was colder than it should have been for late spring. The cemetery was quiet to quiet. No other visitors. No groundskeeper truck. No sound but my own breathing. I walked toward my father's grave slowly. Each step felt like walking towards something irreversible. When I reached the headstone, I looked down. The soil was still fresh, and resting against the base of the stone was a small black envelope with my name written on it. Not Larisa, but daughter. And that's when I heard footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around immediately. There are moments when your body knows before your mind does. My pulse slowed instead of racing. My breathing went shallow. Every instinct told me, don't react too fast. The footsteps stopped a few feet behind me. Larisa. It was my brother. Daniel. Of course. I turned slowly. He stood there in a dark overcoat, hands in his pockets, jaw tight like he was bracing for impact. "You shouldn't be here," I said evenly. He glanced at the envelope at my feet. His eyes flickered just for a second, but I caught it. "I could say the same thing," he replied. That was all the confirmation I needed. "You knew?" I said. He exhaled, looking away toward the tree line. I didn't know what he wrote, just that he might have left something. Might have. "So you've been watching?" My voice didn't shake. "I was proud of that. Marilyn thought you'd come," he admitted quietly. There. It was not grief. Not coincidence. Surveillance. I bent down slowly and picked up the black envelope. Before he could step closer, it was sealed with wax. My father's old signet ring imprint pressed into the center. Daniel took a step forward. "Larisa, maybe we should open it together." "No," I said sharply. The word echoed in the stillness. "Dad wanted me here alone. And unless you're planning on digging him up to argue semantics, I suggest you respect that." His jaw flexed. "You don't understand what you're walking into." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, I don't think you understand what I've already walked through." I broke the seal. Inside was a single folded sheet of thick paper and something small and metallic that slipped into my palm. A key. Not a house key. Smaller. Engraved with a number. 317. My stomach dropped. I unfolded the paper. "If you are reading this, it means I ran out of time. They think I don't know. They think I'm too weak to fight back." My vision blurred for a second. "Go to the bank. Safety deposit box 317. Do not tell anyone, not even Daniel." I felt Daniel's eyes on me as I read that last line. My hands went ice cold. There was more. "The truth about my illness is inside. So is the will they don't want you to see. The will. They told me you were confused," I whispered. Daniel stepped closer. "What does it say?" I folded the paper carefully and slid it back into the envelope. "It says," I replied calmly, "that Dad trusted me." His expression hardened. And that's when my phone started ringing. "Marilyn." I let it go to voicemail, but a text came through seconds later. "If you're at the cemetery, leave now." I looked up at Daniel. "They're afraid," I said softly. For the first time in my life, they're actually afraid. And if my father was right, if there was another will, then everything they'd claimed yesterday at the reading was a lie. I didn't call Marilyn back. I didn't answer Daniel. I walked past him. If you've ever felt your entire childhood rearranging itself in real time, you know the sensation. It's like the floor tilts. But you're the only one who notices. "Larisa," Daniel called after me. "Don't do this alone." I stopped. That was almost funny. Alone was how I'd been raised. Alone was how I'd navigated every family decision once Marilyn entered the picture. Alone was how I sat in hospital waiting rooms while she handled private conversations with doctors. "No," I said without turning around. "I think alone is exactly how this was meant to be." I got into my car and locked the doors before my hands started shaking. Safety deposit box 317. The truth about my illness is inside. My illness, not his illness. The wording clawed at me. My father had been diagnosed with a rare neurological condition 6 months ago. Rapid decline, memory lapses, confusion. That was the narrative. But what if that narrative wasn't clean? I drove straight to the bank, the same branch my father had used for 30 years. The same place he taught me how to open my first savings account when I was 12. At the counter, I kept my voice steady. "I'm here regarding a safety deposit box. Number 317. The woman behind the desk typed something into her computer, then paused. "Are you listed as an authorized party?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. She looked again, then back at me. "Yes," she said slowly. "You are." A rush of cold flooded my chest. Marilyn had told me yesterday, during the official will reading, that Dad simplified everything before he passed. According to the attorney, the house, the accounts, the investments, everything had transferred to Marilyn, with equal consideration for Daniel and me in the future. Convenient. Very clean. Very final. Except, apparently not. The vault room was colder than I expected. Metallic. Clinical. Silent. The bank manager brought out a long, narrow box and placed it in front of me. "Take your time," he said gently. I slid the key into the lock. It turned to easily. Inside the box were 3 items. A thick manila envelope, a flash drive, and a medical folder. I opened the folder first. Within seconds, my stomach dropped so hard I had to grip the edge of the table. The diagnosis wasn't neurological. It was toxicology. Repeated low-dose exposure, gradual cognitive impairment, symptoms consistent with heavy metal poisoning. My father hadn't been deteriorating naturally. He'd been poisoned. I flipped to the final page. Lab results. Signed by a private specialist, dated 2 weeks before his death. Under the notes section, in my father's handwriting, were 3 words. She controls everything. My hands went numb. Marilyn had handled his meals, his medications, his supplements. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Marilyn.it. Was Daniel. A single text. Where are you? She's furious. And Larisa. She just called her lawyer. I stared at the toxicology report again. Heavy metal exposure. Gradual cognitive decline. Control. This wasn't about inheritance. This was about motive. And if Marilyn realized I was holding this file, then 4 p.m. at the grave wasn't the warning. It was the beginning, because I had just uncovered something far bigger than a hidden. Well, I had uncovered a crime. For a full 30 seconds, I couldn't move. Poison. Not decline. Not bad luck. Not age. Poison. I forced myself to breathe. In, out. Slow. Controlled. If my father suspected Marilyn, if he wrote she controls everything, then he knew he was being weakened on purpose, and he still managed to outmaneuver her. I reached for the thick manila envelope next. Inside was a copy of a will dated 3 months ago. Not the sanitized version we heard yesterday in that polished attorney's office. This one was brutally specific. The house, placed in a trust under my name as executor, the investment portfolio, to be liquidated and split equally between Daniel and me. Marilyn, a fixed monthly stipend. Modest. Conditional. Conditional. On no evidence of financial misconduct or coercion. I almost laughed. He knew. He knew. Enough to protect us. But why? Hadn't this will surfaced at the official reading? My hands trembled as I opened the final item. The flash drive. I slid it into my laptop right there. In the vault room, there was only one file. A video. The timestamp was 5 days before his death. I pressed play. My father appeared on the screen, thinner. Yes, pale, but lucid. His eyes were sharp. Larisa. He began. My name. Not daughter. If you are watching this, then I didn't get the chance to explain things properly. I believe I am being slowly poisoned. I cannot prove it yet, but I've hired a private lab. If anything happens to me suddenly, you need to know it wasn't natural. I covered my mouth to keep from making a sound. He continued. Marilyn has isolated me from my doctors. She controls my medication schedule. She insists on preparing my food. I tried to confront her once. The next day, I was told my memory was failing. Gaslighting. Calculated. Strategic. I have amended my will, he said calmly, but I suspect she may attempt to invalidate it. If that happens, everything you need to expose the truth is in this box. My chest felt like it was collapsing inward. He looked directly into the camera then, tired, but determined. Larisa, they underestimated you your whole life. Don't underestimate yourself now. The screen went black. I sat there staring at my own reflection in the laptop screen. My entire grief had just shifted into something else. This wasn't about mourning anymore. This was about justice. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a text. It was Marilyn calling. I answered. Where are you? She demanded. Her voice no longer soft, no longer composed. At the bank, I said calmly. Silence. Then sharp, controlled breathing. You have no right. I have every right. I cut in, especially as executor. Dead silence. How do you know about that? She asked slowly. That told me everything. She didn't know which will I had, which meant she had gambled, and now she was guessing. I stood up, gathering the documents carefully. I'll see you tonight, I said evenly. We need to talk about Dad's medical records. Her voice dropped to a whisper. You don't know what you're playing with, Larisa. I looked down at the toxicology report again. Oh, I replied softly. I think I do. And as I walked out of that vault room, one thought settled into my bones. If she poisoned him slowly, what would she do now that she knew I wasn't blind anymore? I didn't go home first. I went straight to my lawyer. Not the family attorney. Not the polished man who sat beside Marilyn at the will reading like a decorative statue. I went to Evelyn Carter, a probate litigator with a reputation for dismantling polite lies. She watched a video in complete silence. No interruptions. No gasps. Just calculation. When it ended, she leaned back slowly. This, she said carefully, tapping the screen, is motive. I placed the toxicology report beside it. And this, I replied, is opportunity. Evelyn nodded once. If the lab results are legitimate and will verify that, then your stepmother is looking at more than a civil dispute. She's looking at criminal exposure. Criminal. The words settled heavily between us. Can she still control the estate? I asked. Not if we move first. That was the moment everything shifted from emotion to strategy. Evelyn filed an emergency petition to freeze estate transfers pending investigation. She also requested a court order preventing asset liquidation until the amended will could be reviewed. We moved fast, because speed is power. By 6:30 p.m. Marilyn had been formally notified. At 7:12 p.m. She showed up at my house unannounced. I saw her car pull into my driveway from the kitchen window. Slow, deliberate. She didn't look frantic. She looked composed. That scared me more. I opened the door. Before she could knock, "You've always been dramatic, Larisa," she began smoothly, "running to lawyers, making accusations." I stepped aside but didn't invite her in. Dad believed he was being poisoned. A flicker. There. Gone in less than a second, but I saw it. "That's absurd," she said lightly. He was confused. He was tested privately. She blinked once. "That's impossible." "Is it?" The air between us tightened. She folded her arms. "Daniel told me you went to the cemetery. He said you found something." So Daniel had talked. Or she had pressured him. Either way, she was fishing. I tilted my head slightly. "Why would that worry you?" Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Because you're grieving, and grief makes people irrational." There it was again. The narrative. Unstable daughter. Confused father. Clean widow. Except now the story had cracks. "I've petitioned the court to freeze the estate," I said calmly. For the first time, her composure fractured. "You what?" "Until the amended will is reviewed." Her voice sharpened. "There is no amended will." I held her gaze. "That's interesting." She took a step closer. "You have no idea what you're doing," she whispered. "You think you're protecting your father's legacy? You're destroying it." "No," I said quietly. "I'm exposing it." For a long moment, neither of us moved. Then she leaned in slightly. "You should have stayed quiet," she said, not emotional, not pleading, warning. And that's when I understood something chilling. If she had been capable of slowly poisoning a man for control, then she was capable of escalation. My phone buzzed in my hand. A notification from Evelyn. "Court. Approved temporary freeze." Also, Marilyn's attorney just filed something unexpected. I opened the attachment. Emergency filing. Petition for mental health evaluation of me, claiming I was unstable, paranoid, grief-induced, delusion, requesting temporary conservatorship over estate matters on the grounds that I was not of sound judgment. I looked back up at Marilyn. She was already walking toward her car. "You won't win this," she called over her shoulder, but she wasn't smiling anymore. And for the first time since the funeral, I realized this wasn't just a legal battle. It was psychological warfare, and she had just tried to have me declared incompetent, the same way my father had been. Which meant one thing: this wasn't her first time using that strategy. For years, I thought Marilyn's power came from charm. I was wrong. It came from paperwork, from quiet signatures, from carefully worded phrases, from doctors who only heard her version of events. And now she was trying the same script on me. Unstable, emotional, paranoid. I called Daniel. He answered on the first ring. "What did you tell her?" I asked. Silence. "Larisa." She was already suspicious. "I just said you found something at the cemetery." That's all it took. "She's scared," he admitted. "Good." There was a pause. Then he lowered his voice. "She's been moving things." My stomach tightened. "What things?" "Boxes from Dad's office. Hard drives. Files." She told me it was decluttering, but she had the shredder running for an hour last night. Evidence. She was cleaning house. "Daniel," I said carefully, "did Dad ever say anything to you about his health?" Another pause. "Not directly, but a few weeks ago, he asked me if I thought someone could make a person look senile without actually being senile." My blood ran cold. "And what did you say?" I laughed. He whispered. I thought he was joking. We both understood the weight of that now. That night, I barely slept. At 6:45 a.m. My phone exploded with notifications. An email from Marilyn's attorney. Subject line: formal notice of concern. She was requesting an expedited psychiatric evaluation citing erratic behavior, obsessive conspiracy claims, and potential threat to estate stability. Threat to estate stability. Not concern for me. Concern for control. Evelyn called within minutes. "She's moving aggressively," she said. "But here's the problem." I braced myself. "The amended will you found? It was never officially filed." My heart dropped. "What does that mean?" "It means she can argue it's invalid, especially if she convinces a judge you're unstable." My pulse thudded in my ears. So we're back to square one. No, Evelyn said slowly. We escalate. How? We file for exhumation. The word hit like a gunshot. Exhumation. Digging him up. To prove poisoning. To prove he wasn't delusional. To prove she lied. If toxicology confirms heavy metal levels consistent with intentional exposure, Evelyn continued. Marilyn's narrative collapses. And if it doesn't? Silence. If it doesn't, she said quietly, then she wins. High stakes, all or nothing. I stared out my kitchen window, watching sunlight spill across the driveway where Marilyn had stood the night before. She tried to have me declared incompetent. She shredded documents. She isolated my father. And now she was daring me to go public. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Daniel. Are you ready for this to get ugly? His response came almost instantly. It already is. By noon, the petition for exhumation was filed. By 2:00 p.m. Marilyn's attorney countered with an emergency injunction to block it. By 4:00 p.m., exactly 48 hours after my father's note told me to stand at his grave, the court scheduled a hearing. Tomorrow morning. I looked at the clock. 4:00 p.m. The same time he chose. The same time everything shifted. And that's when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. When I opened it, a courier stood there. Delivery for Larisa Whitmore. I signed automatically. The envelope was thick. A no return address. Inside was a single photograph, taken through a window, of me standing at my father's grave. Timestamp in the corner. 4:02 p.m. And written across the bottom in black ink. You should have come alone. For a moment, I couldn't feel my legs. The photo trembled in my hands. It was taken from behind a row of hedges near the cemetery fence. The angle was deliberate, focused, not accidental, and the message, you should have come alone. Daniel. The note at the grave had been clear. Do not tell anyone, not even Daniel, but he had shown up, and someone had been watching. I locked the door immediately and called Evelyn. You need to see this, I said. I sent her the photo. 3 minutes later, she called back. This isn't intimidation, she said quietly. This is obstruction. You think Marilyn sent it? I think someone doesn't want that grave opened. That narrowed it down. But it also widened the danger. Because if someone was surveilling the cemetery, then this wasn't emotional panic. It was coordination. I zoomed into the photo. And the reflection of the polished headstone, barely visible, was part of a vehicle. Black SUV. Tinted windows. I felt something click into place. Marilyn didn't drive a black SUV. Her lawyer did. I grabbed my keys. The hearing was scheduled for 9:00 a.m. the next morning. I couldn't wait. I drove straight to Daniel's house. He opened the door looking exhausted. What now? He asked. I handed him the photo. His face drained of color. I didn't know. He whispered. I know, I said. And for the first time since this started, I believed him. Did Marilyn know you were going to the cemetery? I asked. He hesitated. She asked where you were yesterday. I told her I thought you might go there. So she expected me. Which meant the message wasn't a warning. It was surveillance confirmation. She's panicking, Daniel said. No. I replied slowly. She's calculating. I showed him the toxicology report again. The video, the amended will. He sat down heavily. If this is true, he murmured. It is. He looked up at me, and something shifted in his expression. Not fear. Resolve. What do you need from me? He asked. Witness. That's what I needed. At the hearing, I wouldn't just present documents. I would present pattern. Isolation. Gaslighting. Control. Medical manipulation. Asset transfer. And now surveillance. At 11:30 p.m. Evelyn called again. I pulled something interesting. She said, Marilyn increased your father's life insurance policy 8 months ago. My breath caught. How much? $3 million. And who's the sole beneficiary? Silence. You already know, Evelyn said. Insurance. Inheritance. Control. This wasn't about love. This wasn't about grief. This was motive layered on motive. And tomorrow we were going to drag it into daylight. I barely slept. At 8:55 a.m. Daniel and I walked into the courthouse together. Marilyn was already seated beside her attorney. She looked immaculate, composed, almost serene. When she saw Daniel sitting next to me, her expression flickered. Just once, the judge entered. Proceedings began. Marilyn's attorney stood first. Your Honor, this is a grieving daughter spiraling into paranoia. Evelyn rose calmly. Your Honor, we have medical documentation, video testimony from the deceased, and evidence of estate manipulation. The courtroom shifted. Marilyn didn't look at me. She looked straight ahead, unblinking, And then Evelyn submitted the toxicology report, the video, the amended will, and finally the photograph. With intimidation language, Evelyn added. The judge adjusted his glasses. The room went silent. Marilyn's attorney leaned toward her, whispering urgently. For the first time she looked unsure. The judge cleared his throat. Given the severity of these allegations, he began slowly. This court is granting conditional approval for exhumation pending expedited toxicological review. The sound Marilyn made wasn't loud, but it was sharp. Controlled panic cracking. This wasn't over. Not even close. But as we stepped out of the courtroom, she turned toward me and said quietly, "You have no idea what you've started." I met her gaze steadily. "Oh," I said, "I think I do. Because if the exhumation confirmed poisoning, she wouldn't just lose the estate, she would lose her freedom. And for the first time since my father died, I felt something stronger than grief. I felt power. But power has consequences. And as I walked down those courthouse steps, I noticed something else. Across the street. Parked. Engine running. Black SUV. Watching.